video, hopefully. Sometimes I'm just like Linkin Park. I try so hard and get so far, but I still don't hit my time limit. So with that, this is a quick thing about academic writing and pronouns. So there are some kind of standard approaches to pronouns and some rules people come into college with. But remember that any writing practice should be contextualized. So when students ask me, can I use I in an essay? Can I use you in an essay? Can I use he, she, we, they, whatever in an essay? It really depends on the context. So with the easy one to kind of get out of the way, the second person pronoun you and your, people use this phrasing every day in normal speech, conversation, and dialogue as they're going about their day. You'll get instructions like, you go down to the pizza shop, you take a left, then you go here, then you take a right, then you dance around like a chicken, and voila, ice cream. And so people will use that second person pronoun as a way of giving direction. And when you're looking face to face at a person and you're responding to who your audience is, that's fine in an everyday situation. And in some creative writing classes or in some personal writings, it's preferred. It's a way that some instructors will say, use the second person pronoun and use it as a way to almost create a sequence of events or a sequence of instructions. And that's totally fine. That fits a certain genre. It fits a certain context. So we want to be aware that context will trump anything I say. That being said, most academic writing, you don't know who you is. And that's not an identity crisis. That is, you don't know who the reader is. So you have to be careful using second person pronouns like you or your. I would recommend avoiding it unless you've been giving explicit instruction to use it. With that, you can also, I'll also get the question about personal pronouns. I believe statements are usually discouraged because anything in an academic essay, we're going to assume are your thoughts, beliefs, and feelings. So unless they're in quotation marks, we're going to assume that anything you say are yours. So you don't have to say, I think, I feel, believe, just say it. I feel like it's going to rain today. It's going to rain today. We use I think, I feel, I believe as modifiers to soften an argument, but there are better ways to do that are more rhetorically effective and don't distract. There are some uses for personal pronouns in academic essays. You can use them to organize the text and guide the reader through the argument. This is giving meta discourse that says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to take you guys through this, or to report methods, procedures. These happen in like lab reports and stuff. We analyzed, we interviewed, I analyzed, I interviewed, I did this thing. But be careful because some contexts want you to use past passive voice. In the methods section for a chemistry class, you should more often than not use past passive voice. The beaker was poured, or 3.4 milliliters were added to the mixture, that kind of thing. And so sometimes you need to think not just about the pronouns, but about the active or passive voice connected to them. You can also use first-person pronouns to signal your position in a debate. I contend, but again, that's for softening. Most people just state their claims, and so it tightens up your prose unless you feel like it's a really high-tension situation and it seems important to add as many modifiers as possible. But most academic essays, that's not gonna win the day. You can avoid first-person pronouns, and you can replace them, either the first-person or the second-person pronouns. With second-person pronouns, we said not to use them. And so what you want to get in the habit of doing is shifting. Instead of saying, I think, I feel, believe, you may not need to say those at all. And instead of saying you or your, you can replace that with one or a person, or be more specific, the viewer, the reader, the audience. So in this case, in order to become a doctor, you must complete rigorous education. In order to become a doctor, one must complete a rigorous education. As you can see in figure 1.2, well, you don't know who you is. Maybe they can't see. Maybe they're blind. Maybe they're reading Braille and the figure is not there. So as the reader might note, as the viewer might blah, 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 as can be seen. That's a little funky, but it probably fits in science writing. So that's a possibility. The other thing to be aware of is, and it's becoming less of an issue, he, she, they mismatches, subject pronoun agreement. Also be aware that sometimes it's just better to not use vague pronouns. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. Let me just check and make sure I'm not missing anything important. A lot of students are told to never use I, but there are things that are meaningful. There are effective uses of I when you want to be assertive, when you want to add clarity, because sometimes trying to avoid the first person, like we saw in that other example, can make it a little weird. And then when you're trying to position yourself in the essay, especially if you're talking about research that you took, you could say, I surveyed 14 participants, or you could just say, what's more common is to use the passive voice in science disciplines and say 14 participants were surveyed for this study and the results were blah. So there are ways, so you really want to think rhetorically about how you're using these. With that, if you can use more specific language, that's the important thing. Where I see the most I, we, you kind of things are really when people are struggling to shift from a personal approach to writing. They've been trained or been given a lot of practice with personal narrative, because that's sometimes how we get writers to enjoy writing a little more, because they get to write about themselves and their experiences. But then they struggle when they have to shift genres from personal narrative to academic analysis, where it's not about you, it's about this thing that you're studying. And it's not just about what you think about it, there's research involved. So we have to learn how to shift voicing and take you out of it a little bit more, even though the motivation for writing comes from you, you may not talk about your personal perspective. There's also kind of a cheat sometimes that can be helpful. Technically, if I'm analyzing a music video, I'm a listener, I'm an audience, I'm a reader. So you can put yourself in a roundabout way. Instead of saying, instead of saying, well, I felt this about the video, or this music video really made me feel like I learned something or helped me, process through this. That sounds like a personal narrative and a personal response. What you can say to make it shift into academic voices, some viewers, some listeners may respond by through healing because of this thing that happens in the text, or because the lyrics are powerful. And by shifting to that viewer, reader, audience language, it sounds more academic and less personal narrative. So pronouns are okay, but you want to be careful how you use them and when you use them, and take into account the rhetorical situation. So generally avoid you and your unless you have a very specific directive to use them or are told it's allowed. Generally avoid I if it's just to say I think, I feel, I believe. Use it if it's to say something you did as part of the methods for a research project, especially things like a case study or in the humanities or social sciences, but avoid it and switch to passive voice if you are in the physical or natural sciences. Those are the kind of the basics. And generally avoid vague pronouns if you don't need them, and use more specific nouns like readers, viewers, person, that sort of thing. Hopefully that helps.